Well, all right, welcome everyone. So before we get started, I'm going to ask you for help with a little optics situation. As you know, we're filming this at the moment, so if some of you wouldn't mind kind of moving a little forward into the center, it makes us look a little fuller as we broadcast this out. So, and also as we open up to Q&A in a bit. There'll be a roving mic, and it'll be easier to kind of have everyone a little bit closer together. I know some people just like to keep separate for health reasons. We understand that, but this looks great. Thank you. All right. Well, welcome everyone. And I know that we are the last session between tonight and evening shenanigans, though. But we have a great panel, so we're going to keep this interesting. So as I'm sure you've been hearing today, we've been hearing some good numbers on the rebound side. Amadeus, I think a few weeks back, they put out a report that global hotel occupancies now outpaced pre-pandemic levels. We're continuing to see the pendulum swing, for better or for worse, toward fewer restrictions. I'm not going to pretend that I'm upset that I do not have to take a COVID test to get back home to the U.S. later this week. But still, considering the level of trauma, and that's not a word to use lightly, but I think as we'll discuss in a bit, it's a bit accurate, that the travel industry has experienced during the pandemic. There's a lot more to recovery than just getting people back on the road, and we're seeing, I'm sure some of you experienced firsthand the last few days, some of the severe service disruptions that we're seeing with the airlines. And so what does that mean for the TMC? Because they took as big of a financial hit as anyone, and a lot of them weren't quite as lucky in terms of government support around the world that the airlines and the hotels were. And a lot of them are still dealing with lower staffing levels and other challenges as well. So what has that meant for the buyer relationships with the TMCs? And what sort of changes can we see coming out of the pandemic? So as I mentioned, we have an excellent panel of questions, excellent panel of experts rather, to answer these questions today. But first I have some questions for you. We're going to do just a few polling and get the feel of the room here. So bear with me as we bring up the first poll question, and this is just a little gauging of the relationship in the room. So how does your current relationship with your TMC compare with your relationship prior to the COVID-19 pandemic? So you have your range of choices here. If it's better, worse, no change, not sure, or we have a separate option if you've completely changed TMC partners over the course of the pandemic. So we'll give just a moment for these results to come up. And I left my glasses at home, so I'm going to do my best here to spot these things out as they come up. I realize I didn't introduce myself. I'm Michael Baker. I'm the executive editor with Business Travel News. My third time at this show. I'm very glad to be back. All right, so it looks like a pretty strong majority say deteriorated. No one said improved. No one's not sure, so that's the good at least. And we have
we're sure it's
yes, everyone
deteriorating.
is confident. That's good. And a few have said no change, and small amounts have changed TMCs in the course of the pandemic. Okay, so let's jump to the next question, which might shed a little light on this previous one. It's does your TMC currently have enough frontline consultants to service your account? Simple yes or no. All right. Well, it's only 2 votes, so it's not an over. I'm not a statistician, but I won't publish these numbers coming out of this. Oh, here we go. We have a little bit more, but it's all right. So far, no one has said yes.
Not looking good, is it?
So that's
Not looking good.
Yes, we're not surprised. I shouldn't say. All right. We will move on to question 3. So how does the quality of the TMC consultants servicing your account compare with pre-pandemic? And here we have the simple options: better, same, or worse. Okay. So it's not quite as strong of a majority as the other one saying worse. So
No.
it's about 50, worse or the same or better. All right, just a couple more questions to get through here. Actually, one more. So what do you think is going to happen to your TMC costs over the next year? You think it's going to change, rise over the... I see everyone's... I guess all the questions come up at once. I didn't realize. I thought I had to go through them one by one. So, but see, we have some answers here coming in. Just to take a look at what you think of costs. Okay, oh, here we go. A little needle move there. All right, so it looks like a plurality at least thinks it's, most people think it's going to go up. A plurality thinks it's going to be above the rate of inflation. A smaller amount says it'll go up but below the rate of inflation. But since that most people think they're going to be going up. All right, well that gives us a little background to begin our discussion here. And I'm just going to start with a general question for our entire panel, who I will first introduce. First we have Bex Evans. She's an independent consultant. So I have Clive Ratton. He's the Chief Executive of the Business Travel Association. And then I apologize, Anna, for she's already given me permission that I'm going to mispronounce her name. But Anna Bochlowska-Vatwork is the manager of global facilities at AMS, so she's going to be giving us the bar perspective, as will Katerina Navarro, who is with Capgemini. So let's just start, broadly speaking, just talk about how the pandemic has transformed the TMC client relationship, and just kind of what are some of the key differences we're seeing as we're returning to travel now? What are some of the key changes or trends we're seeing in this relationship? So Bex, we'll start with you.
Okay, so before I became an independent consultant, for those who don't know me, I've managed a travel management company for 8 years and became the managing director about 3 months before we went into a global pandemic. So really had a good fun time during the last 2.5 years. I left in January and have decided to start on my own, and I'm looking at travel risk management now, so it's a slightly different area. But I want to sort of talk to you from what it's been like from a TMC's perspective, and I'm sure that right now you want everything to kind of go back to how it was before, but it's just going to be a really difficult situation. There's a long gap of recovery. There's a lot of money to be made up, and there just aren't the reserves there now to look after things. But one of the biggest issues that I see is that the corporate relationship has changed, and actually what you need from your travel management company is quite different. If we're really honest though, and I always am, sorry, it probably changed before the pandemic, if we're totally honest. The value proposition that the travel management companies have been working with the corporates have not quite matched what people have needed for quite a few years. What's happened now, of course, is that we're on the other side of not having any staff to actually be able to kind of then do the consulting and the new pieces that people need to understand. So this industry has always been about smoke and mirrors. The pandemic has kind of opened up all of those, if you like, and now is a really good chance to start talking about those relationships in a different way. But what I'm hearing when I'm talking to corporates, and unfortunately I'm hearing it again and again, and you guys have reflected all of that today, is that I'm not happy with my travel management company. Services have gone massively below my expectation, and actually what are they going to do to make this better, because we're coming out of this now, and how are we going to improve things? So that's my thoughts at the moment.
Right. And Clive, we'll move to you. You represent a lot of the TMCs,
Yeah.
and they've been through a difficult time, as we said. So
Yeah, well, it's true, and everybody's been through a difficult time, right? And this industry was always a particularly difficult, narrow margin industry when you're a service industry from a travel management perspective, and I think it has hit the industry particularly hard from both sides, both from the supplier chain squeezing the TMC to obviously the clients, and customer service is impacted. And I think what has changed, I hope, and seeing these numbers is really disappointing given where we're at, but it's understandable from the position we are, but in many ways it gives me hope, because what it says is that the relationship needs to change, and that's two-way, right? That's not just one way. And my passion, and I've been on not being a travel manager, but I've run a TMC like Bex, and I've run commercial divisions of airlines working with TMCs, and that the importance of the part that they play in terms of building a global company for you, for your revenues, looking after your most important assets, your business travellers and your directors, to say we really need to engage these guys as being true partners as part of the business. I, as leading the industry association, kind of say we're a professional services industry. I'm not saying we're necessarily at the level of what professional services industries are, but that's what we aspire to be, and therefore we also aspire for the relationships and the partnerships with the people in the room to be that way. And I think that's that's the positive change that comes out of a negative, because there is always the reasons of negative is that you can change it and make the change. And I think many of our members are really looking at this as an opportunity, and the pain of change is what you're going through now, but will be better in the longer term. And I see the passion and the absolute will of travel management companies to deliver outstanding customer service, because, being brutally honest, and our quid at this point is there's a real opportunity for them now, because travel's become even more complicated than it was before, and it's not about selling an air ticket now. You can all do that yourselves without any issue. It is the end-to-end experience, the data and the IT and the intelligence and the consulting that goes around it. And I think that's an opportunity for all of you in this room and all of our members to actually make an industry that we're all proud of and deliver something that's a bit special in terms of the relationship moving forward.
Absolutely. And we've been hearing for, even before the pandemic, the possibility of looking at some new ways of contracting and working with them, and that this could present some of those opportunities. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So Anna, how is your relationship with your TMC at the moment?
When I reflect upon it, I think there are two layers or two angles to that. From the operational perspective, obviously we are impacted by the same issues that impact everybody. The level of service has decreased. We have quite a lot of noise internally in terms of from travelers who are experiencing challenges and are not necessarily getting the support they need from TMCs. And while I understand the context and I understand that it's not the TMC's fault, there is a broader picture behind it. The traveler doesn't really care. So this is one angle. That's the operational angle. But from the point of view of a travel buyer, and I think that my relationship with our TMC is actually better, improved, compared to what it was before the pandemic. It was good. We worked together, but it was much more pragmatic and, again, led by strategic goals, operational level of SLAs, etc. Whereas now, I feel like my TMC and my company have been through this seriously scary and difficult experience together. We weathered it through together, and now we have emerged, changed. And the nature of our relationship has changed. For such a long time during the pandemic, we would meet regularly on bi-weekly calls. We had 0 travel-related topics to discuss because there was no travel for us. And still we kept them in the diary and we continued, so we got to know each other better on a personal level, but equally from the point of view of corporate culture. I understand the culture of our TMC better now, and I feel they understand us better as well. So I feel like there's a disconnect between my experience as a travel manager and the experience of our travelers who have not had the benefit of regular recurring meetings with a lovely person within our TMC. So I think this is something that, well, it's up to me to address with our travelers, but I would expect support from our TMC to do that in terms of communication, to provide context to travelers around why they are going through such pains when they are trying to get from one place to another. So I think this is how this changed.
Absolutely. And I think one of the earlier sessions today, someone spoke about just the importance of honesty at this point, and just being transparent that there are going to be issues, there are going to be problems, there are going to be staffing issues, and that if you're upfront about it, that's better than trying to cover over it and then have people be surprised when these issues arrive. Yeah. So, Katarina, would you say your experience is similar, or how has your relationship evolved?
Yeah, it's similar, and I echo what Clive was saying about this whole partnership approach. I think we've always had that, and that's when I compare it to my other colleagues in other categories of buying, buying IT, buying laptops and a resource. I think travel, we've always been closer to a partnership approach, because we have this ecosystem where the TMC really is a centerpiece of our marketplace. So we've been there already, but I think we've taken a further step onwards, and as you say, honesty, transparency, and proactive transparency. So what I always hate is a traveler coming to me with something that's a problem that I didn't even know. So then I have to fake the fact of, yeah, we're on it, when really we're not. So, and this is, I think, where the TMC now is catching up slowly and just making sure let's stay closer together on the overall ecosystem has changed. The environment is difficult. It's very volatile. The supplier marketplace is very volatile. But if there's issues on your systems, your tools, your back office support, let us know upfront and give us quantifiable data. So if somebody comes to me and say, like, my invoice hasn't arrived, I can tell them exactly, well, right now, yes, we have a 0.1% error rate. So I'm sorry, you're one of them. It's not a huge issue. It's a small one, and we're addressing it manually. And I think that's something that has evolved. And one of the things more specifically we've done in looking overall, throughout the pandemic, we stayed in touch with all of our key suppliers, regular calls and seeing how are you doing for the people that were there. We had a lot of suppliers that were just physically not available. The TMC was available. But we realized very quickly that really the two big contracts that from a volume perspective were at stake, it's the TMC and the card contract. Somewhere in there is a volume statement that is linked to some financial benefits that with COVID, it just wasn't working anymore. And we realized very quickly that yes, we can bring our lawyers to the table and we can talk about force majeure and the impact, or you can just say we all recognize this is nobody's fault and we'll discuss. And we opened up the contract, we completely restructured, renegotiated it with an element that now is future-proof, and if COVID comes back and continues, the contract covers us. If we go back to good old times and even better, the contract covers us. And that, I think, puts us in a much better position on both sides to be ready for a future together.
Excellent. And Clive, is that something you're seeing kind of happening more, or are these conversations happening and people looking at kind of inspirational ways of changing these contract terms?
I think they are, because as I said, the relationship has changed. And I just want to touch on the service piece, because again, I would say this, wouldn't I? But just from our membership, in the last 3 months, the booking touch ratio has gone from 1 in every 10 bookings that requires a change to 1 in 4. So it's a 300% increase in the number of touches per P&R booking, whatever you want to call it. So a lot across our membership, their staff levels are up to about close to the right sort of levels for the revenue that's coming through, but they're nowhere near the levels for the service that is required on top of them. So it's important just to make that distinction again, not trying to defend it, but it's really important as to where it was. In May, 5,500 man hours were taken up across our members just doing changes and cancellations on airline tickets. So to give you some indication of the size of the issue. So one thing I'll say, I think the initial issues now are not good, but they should be short to mid-term and changing as we get more staff on. But I think you're absolutely right in looking at the opportunities that are being looked at in terms of what the contracts are, what is really important, and if service is important. And I'm delighted to hear that in a bizarre way, because that's really what, as a service industry, you do. That comes top of the tree for you as your internal customers want service. Then that drives to the real strengths of TMCs, or should drive to the strengths of the TMCs, whether you choose to go online service or a full touch service. So I think it is an opportunity. We, as you know, we did a white paper over a year ago now around the commercial model and the need for it to be renewed, and looking at other alternatives, because we feel that drives that change, and it drives to a more service-led culture than a transactional culture. So I think TMC should be taking that opportunity, and they should be coming to talk to you proactively around that. And some of those conversations will probably be quite difficult, because you may not want to hear about them, because, as you all said, the price will go up. But if the value goes up, the return on investment, and your organisations shed loads of money by you being in your global presence, then everybody is a winner. So yeah, I think it is coming, and I think if it's not happening, you should be having those conversations, frankly, with your TMC.
Okay, and Bex, are you hearing an appetite for that from your clients who you consult with?
There's a huge amount of a requirement for change. How do I say this without sounding like a horrible person towards TMCs? I love TMCs, and I worked with them for such a long time. And Clive, I mean this with due respect, because but we've been quite reactive as an industry to what our clients need, and now we kind of need to get one step ahead of that, because actually what the clients need from TMCs now is kind of what they always needed as far as service industry and things like, apart from as far as the service was concerned. What's different now is the volumes have gone down a lot, and we were managing our clients based on their volumes. This has been the conversation for a long time, and arguably that's not what a travel management company is there for. We're not there just to, I'm not even we anymore. They're not there just to book travel for you, and if that's what they're doing, then there's something seriously wrong with your value relationship and your supplier relationship there, because you can do that yourself. If that's all you're getting out of your TMC, then there's a lot more that needs to come to it. But the TMCs are quite slow at coming to the table with talking about change. So if you take travel risk management for an example, TMCs will tell you that they've been doing that for 20 years and they've got that down to a fine art. They haven't, have they? Let's be honest. So it's about being willing to change as a TMC.
But I think part of that is also they're sitting on this archaic back office systems that's not even globalized and aligned.
No.
So for them to be able to discuss change, they have to actually invest in updating. Because we tried in the contract to say, okay, like transaction fee model, management fee, let's think out of the box. What else can we do to drive this? And the TMC wasn't ready to commit to anything. So in the contract, we have some vague phrase now, like in a year from now, we'll review and we're ready. But right now, they said the way we're set up and our systems operate, they can't support anything else. And right now, there's no funding.
Yeah.
So how can you make that
update.
change? And I think, I should probably be honest and say the reason I get a lot of the work that I'm getting from clients is because of the subscription model that we put together when I was at Blue Cube. So people want to find out about that, and they're going to talk to me about that, which is fine. But it's still unless you're prepared to have that very, very honest conversation with, as a TMC, how you make money, which people just shudder, versus what the corporate needs, then you can't move that conversation forward. But for me, the subscription fee model was I spoke to this to a friend of mine who works in the industry 12 years ago. We couldn't understand why we were still charging transaction fees when the value was everything you did after the booking. Like, we just couldn't understand it. So when I launched the subscription fee model back in 2020, just at the point that a pandemic was happening, it was the worst time to possibly do it, but it changed the conversation and it allowed us to have that conversation around value and what we could give over and above what the booking was for. But if you still have a very transaction-based model with your TMC, it's very difficult to have those conversations.
All right, excellent. All right. So we're going to encourage questions from the room in just a moment, and if anyone has their own kind of story they'd like to tell, we're happy to listen to that. So we'll have, it'll be my roving mic here in just a moment. But I want to go back and talk about just the pure staffing levels at this point. And Clive, I think that this is a good question for you, just to kind of get a general idea of where things are in terms of bringing staff back. Will staff ever be back to levels they were pre-pandemic, and maybe how it's different for the larger mega TMCs versus some of the smaller, more privately owned TMCs.
Well, I think it's an issue for everybody, not just TMCs. I'm talking to bays at the government around a whole UK national, how do we get people back to work? So we're not alone in this problem, as I'm sure all of you in your organisations are suffering the same thing. I think what is different about our industry to a certain degree, and I make this wider than just TMCs, airlines, car hire, whatever you want to do, is not so much we have this kind of recruitment issue, we have an image issue around what the travel industry is. It's gone through a very difficult 2 years. People have left and are looking at it, and you come back and you see all the disruption at the airports and on the trains and that stuff, and going, well, do I really want to come back into that for the money that I've got? So one, it comes to cost. I've talked to a lot of the members who are fighting over the same staff, and the cost goes up, and the demands of employees have changed dramatically around working from home. So we're working very hard with our members to understand how we need to adapt as an industry to match the needs of the modern day worker and attract them back. We're working on how we attract new talent into the industry through universities and schools, and equally to attract lost talent, because it comes to your point, I think, on the survey around what is the standard of staff in your TMCs now pre-pandemic, is we lost a lot of experience. And we need to get those people back in the industry as well, and move it back. And I think there is a lot of that being done. The general number being thrown about is we're at about 80% of the staff pre-pandemic. That's talking across everybody. You may have different experiences, but that's the kind of average that we're at. And there are still some gaps on frontline staff, but equally there are gaps in IT and finance, all of the bits and pieces that make the whole of the relationship work. And they're harder in many ways to get back, because obviously IT skills are transferable people, and you can earn a lot more money probably somewhere else. So we have a campaign on the image of the industry to come up. I think we have to work together all as this room of making it an industry that is attractive again. Excuse my language in this, but it's lost some of its sexiness that it had, and travel was one of the benefits we had of it, and we need to work to move that back. But I remain confident. It's a fantastic industry. I've been here 41 years. I've done some amazing things, and we just have to tell stories now. It's about experience. That's what the next generation employee wants, and booking some of your people's travel is an experience. I've did that job for many years, and I loved booking a CEO or a rock star or whatever, and being part of what you delivered as an organisation. And I think that's where you can help, is having engagement from your travellers and your senior people, of making those people feel really valued and talking about them, telling them the stories about the little London to Paris trip that was done. It resulted in a multi-million-pound deal for you guys, as it were. So I think we all have to work together to get the staff back, and I think we will achieve it. I know we will, but it is going to be a bit of short-term pain as we're competing with industries right across the board here, and talking to colleagues in Europe and further afield, they're suffering the same thing. But it's interesting that we were all pushing to be going online and not having people, and now what we're really struggling to do is get people back. And that's a real flip, but an encouraging flip, because it shows how personal and how human travel is.
Yeah, and I think it's also an opportunity, though, for the TMC to step up. TMC step up and get bigger, right now, because the new normal is coming in. And for me, for instance, I've recently extended my role to now be travel and mobility. So now we're taking I took fleet in, we're taking everything that's ground mobility in, because we're now rethinking the whole what used to be commute, what used to be business travel, where's the convergence office, and how far can we go on a fully integrated model. And that is where I would like to see the TMC world step up and say, like, well, yes, we used to do air and hotel, and we've been doing that for quite some time, good or bad, leave aside, but we can do so much more, and we can really be the strategic centerpiece of your mobility program overall.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
We're doing something similar, albeit with different sectors of the business. So in AMS, travel sits under facilities, and we're making it an element of a broader strategy towards location and facilities, because with the hybrid working model that is being increasingly implemented in different organizations, it sort of doesn't matter where you work from, and therefore travel becomes just a tool to get you to your work, but in a new way, not in the sense that you commute to your office on a daily basis. There are new questions that emerge. For instance, if I fancy working from an entirely different location globally for 3 months, does my company pay for that? Do they adjust my salary to the local standard? There are different questions that emerge, but to your point, Katrina, it's part of a broader conversation and bringing travel into a broader context, not just something that we do when we have to, or something that we like to do or don't like to do, but inherent element of the business rooted in the corporate culture. So I agree.
Absolutely. So we have a question.
Yes, I have a question on the pricing model. I just wanted to understand. So you're saying that so you don't see a combination of, for example, a management tool, a management fee together with transaction fee, maybe also taking into consideration a transaction fee for changes, even for cancelled trips, but just completely a subscription fee?
Yeah, I mean, you need to talk to CW. I need to go and get on the CWT stand and see what they've just launched as far as their subscription fee is, and to know what it's about, because they've just done a big marketing campaign around it. But I can talk to you a little bit about what ours was about. So I led this, so I'm quite comfortable talking about it. Because of this issue, because I knew the blockers, I spent a lot of my time within my career talking to bookers. I used to work for HRS, so I used to implement that into bookers, and I could see the problems that they were having with TMC tools, with going off piece to book stuff. There was an issue around leakage, and there was always this issue around the fees. If people could find it cheaper, then they would. So for me, that was always the issue, that you needed to try and get away from that. Why are you putting a block at the point of sale, when actually what's important is what happens afterwards? So when we launched our subscription fee model, we based it on removing all transaction fees, removing all management fees, and it was a per person, per user fee, which then included everything else that we were looking at doing. But we did it and it's still live now. Blue Key Bar going out selling this right now, and I don't know why I'm selling them so hard. I'm really not trying to. It's just to say that it is possible. Lots of the arguments I heard when we first launched it were, well, it's just a management fee, isn't it, cut up in a slightly different way? Actually, no, it isn't. It's a completely different thing. Yes, there's a lot of forecasting and some planning as to what you think you're going to deliver and therefore what your value is to that TMC. There's got to be some very honest conversations around how people make money and where that money comes from. But if you're willing to bring that to the table, then a subscription fee model can be an outcome which takes everything else away. Happy to talk about it outside of this.
And just curious, has anyone in the room had success with this model that would be willing to talk about it just a little bit?
Has anyone used it at all yet?
Right, or maybe not success with it.
So Michael.
It's brand new.
So we couldn't do it on a global scale. TMC wasn't ready, but we did it for our VIP desk. So globally, I have a little less than 200 very senior people, VIPs. So for them, we did subscription model, and we actually did it in phases. So depending on how many transactions you do, there's different thresholds of where you set into a global fee. So it's just been live for 3-4 months now. And the intention was exactly to take this noise away of why does this cost me this amount, does this cost me this, because it's like a different kind of service. So that's gone. And what the assistants really like, because all of the VIP, obviously they don't make their own bookings, it's the assistants doing the bookings. What they appreciate is now it's one line less in the expense tool to do. So it saves you a click.
Yeah.
And saving a click is always worth something. So far so good. Ultimately, financially, how it maps out, I have to see at the end. My global finance didn't like it so much because we work on project code, and any central charges are always a bit painful. But I think it's good to observe to see if we can then take it further.
Yes, and not to advertise for CWT, but I think that is kind of some of their selling points they're using in their new model is that it's more transparent. It's easier to manage in the back end. So we have a question.
And I'm not sure if it's a question, but it's just I think there are still a lot of things that don't make sense. So we're in industry. And we had all these people working, the pandemic hit, we let all these people go, and now where are all these people? And we're trying to get all these people on board. Yeah. But that's not going to happen in like the upcoming 6 to 9 months.
It's not.
And when we have them in 6 or 9 months, we don't need them anymore because we have all kinds of other stuff arranged in the meantime. So aren't we solving the wrong problem? So thinking about getting ahead of things, I'm just thinking, and I'm looking at the Reset Your TMC relationship. If I'm a buyer, my TMC is not going to solve my problem. So I need to solve my own problem. So shouldn't I start taking more things in-house and solving it myself? You see all these travel teams going into like reporting into the HR team and all this other stuff. These are important people on the road. My TMC, for all kinds of good reasons, maybe a effed up financial model over the last couple of years. Maybe I should just, now is the moment to bring it in-house. And actually, if we start doing it now, we're 2 years too late.
All right. Thoughts?
Every single company that I'm talking to at the moment is looking at bringing it in-house.
Yeah.
So it's very topical what you're saying. It goes back to my concern that I've had for years now, and I've shared it with Clive over the years, so it shouldn't come as a shock that TMC's lost what their value proposition was quite a long time ago, way before this. This is just the kind of nail in the coffin, if you like, for an old industry, unless we can come and reinvent ourselves. So I think you're thinking what a lot of other people are thinking right now, which is, again, sad when you've loved an industry as much as we have, but it has to evolve in one way or another.
Bex, are these largely larger companies or?
Yeah.
Okay, because that kind of leads me to the question of kind of where do SMEs, small and mid-market sized companies, fall into this equation now, because they're kind of in a catch-22 situation now where they're probably don't have the capabilities to take this in-house, because a lot of times they're a travel manager, someone who's doing 4 or 5 other things besides travel management, so they certainly don't have the resources to do this themselves. But as we talk about the staffing through the TMCs, they're not able to kind of give the more attention to the smaller companies as well, and so they're kind of left behind in both senses. So kind of what's the solution for a smaller company right now?
You want me to go with that one?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to just give you for my 2 pence worth what it's worth. I think the future is a risk travel management company, and it's combining these two things, and then potentially the future is outsourcing. For smaller companies, there's no excuse now. You may not need to work with a travel management company, but you do need to have your house in order as far as knowing what your travellers are doing, where they are, and having some form of control over it. That's actually a massive opportunity for TMCs. The SME market is there for the taking. It's just that we've kind of focused on the larger companies because of the return, because of the way the models work. We can change that as TMCs, and we can have different conversations with people. Corporates have never actually needed this support more than ever, but because they're so disillusioned with the way that it's been working for the last however many years, they're now looking at alternative ways of doing things. It doesn't have to be like that. The model has to change and the way we work together has to change, but I think there is room for all of us still.
And Clive, you work with a broad spectrum of TMCs, so how are you seeing kind of the SME concerns handled right now?
Well, yeah, I just want to pick up on the point the gentleman made
Sure.
there, if I may, first, because I accept what you're saying, but I don't agree with it clearly from that perspective, because the travel industry and travel management industry is much broader than putting it together. In fact, we know companies that had Working House coming out and talking to members about how they can manage the service right the way through, because they want to deliver customer service to them and raise it up to the point I was making before. And I think it's evolving the situation rather than changing it is the right way to go in this circumstances, and it applies to the SMEs as well. It's a huge window of opportunity for travel management companies right now, that where SMEs, and the definition of an SME is pretty broad anyway, but in my lifetime an SME was a £50,000 spend, but if you talk to somebody at GBT it's probably about 8 million as an SME. So you have to put it into perspective, and but what you're certainly seeing is people, travel management companies are becoming aggregators of data and information and booking principles, and that if you're an SME, that you're busy doing stuff, to go to somebody who takes that on board for you and looks after the risk point, to Beck's point, make sure you're safe, that there's a real opportunity, and we're seeing a real expansion in the number of SMEs that are using travel management companies. And it's not just small travel management companies, because they realise the complexity. So there is a point, and a valid point you made, well, that's a problem only for 6-9 months while it's really complex, but I think once you're in, and travel management companies need to evolve, so that I absolutely accept that, and we agree with it, that the wider breadth of the type of customer that is using a travel management company actually will expand and improve, so long as we match as an industry to deliver their needs. So yeah, I have a slightly different view around it, and I think it's an exciting opportunity, to be honest with you. And I think you've got Emburse on your shirt there, so being part of the whole expense management system within for an SME is really important, along with the rest of the travel. And again, a TMC can pull all of that together.
Absolutely. And I can say at BTN, our definition has traditionally been for SME mid-size, we would say $2 to $12 million in U.S. booked air. So I think we're kind of on the more liberal side of what you call that. So we have a question here. Yes.
Probably a question more for the buyers. Are there any initiatives that your companies have considered to support our travellers while the demand is so high and the resources are so low? So not insourcing, but any other kind of operational support or other initiatives?
We roll out training to very short training videos with advice on what to look out for, what to expect when you travel these days. Some of it evolved quite naturally from information around COVID-related restrictions, but we took it further to educate travelers on other things, like these days it would be around wait times at the airport, for instance. But we have some videos on our intranet on the different travel topics, travel challenges that a traveler may face on the road. We have some also on some of the essential rules on our travel policy. We also did a project with a consultancy to review our travel program, and as a result of that, we arrived at what we call guiding principles. So it's like a human version of the travel policy in the sense that it's not about benchmarks, it's not about you can't do business travel or something like this. It's about what to consider when you are planning your trip. So think about how it will impact your well-being, think about how it will impact the business from a cost perspective, but also from operational perspective. Think about why you are expected to travel, what you want to achieve during your business trip by taking the business trip. And these guiding principles are actually part of our broader return to a renewed workplace program framework that we have. Like many companies, we have offices which are empty. We'd like them to be filled with people. So we have a program to support that, and travel plays a part in it as well, in the sense that we are trying to keep the communication consistent so that when we speak about something in one context, it links naturally and it feels naturally in the context of the corporate culture with something that's being discussed in a different context. So for instance, travel, the rhetoric we use right now for travel links into the rhetoric that we use for things like office utilization and things like that. So this is how we are trying to actively engage with travelers, in addition to just supporting them in an operational way.
And Anna, Anna, quick question. The videos you mentioned, were those something you produced in-house, or so it wasn't the TMC that did this for you? This was something you did?
We produced it ourselves. We're big on DIY at our company. But yes, and I think it from our point of view, it adds value because these are our colleagues, our voices, different accents, diverse accents globally. So it's interesting, and I think it underlines again the corporate culture.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we didn't touch on too much yet is the aspect of technology as well, is to showcase what's available as technology, as self-serve platforms. We historically had a very good online adoption, above 90%. Obviously, post-COVID, a lot more questions, a lot more uncertainties where people like to pick up the phone, and there's certain cultures as well, where we know there's certain markets where it's always been more heavy on I like to talk to somebody just to get a reassurance. So what we're trying to push as well is to update people on the booking tool is there. It's worked for you in the past. It's going to work for you again. And by the way, here are the amount of updates we run in the last 2 years. And I think there's been almost 20 different new self-serve elements that are now available. You can cancel things. You can change things online. You can rebook your train online that wasn't available before, just to guide people of trying to be self-sufficient, so you don't need to pick up the phone, and you don't need to wait in line for a consultant. And then it's driving these like joint communication campaigns where we say, you all know what it looks like when you book your personal vacation. Obviously, inflation is there, prices are up, capacity is down. Well, guess what? It's the same in business travel. So we're struggling. We're here to protect you. And by the way, here is the channels that you can use. Going to the TMC, going to our internal teams to provide feedback, and we will support you. But have a bit of patience as well if everybody get back on their feet and bring the corporate travel industry back.
Okay.
Can I
sure, go ahead.
add some? So I think it's a really interesting question to ask. And I'd love to have a group of travellers and do some user groups around what is for them. So, for me, everybody wants an experience now, whatever reason they're travelling for. So how do we help and get the passion and the excitement back into people travelling? Because if they're having a good time, they're winning new business, doing their job and coming back happy, right? And you keep your asset. So how do we incorporate the opportunity of offering them an additional stay while they're out there and as part of your travel program? We talked about at one point in the company doing a travel buddy, where you can actually pay for somebody to travel with you, if it's somebody VIP, to look after all your travel, or you can pay to them so they're with you until the airport and make sure that you're checked through if that's what you worry about. All of it comes at a cost, but we've got to think about how do we enhance the traveller's experience to book through a travel management company and stick with your program. And I would love to have a conversation involving travellers saying, what is it that you want from the experience of business travel? If taking all of the the usual kind of constraints off that will be there, but putting it out there, because we have to create an experience for each of these individuals as they come through, and it has to be a good experience, clearly not a bad experience. And I think there's a lot more adding on that, you know, we can have the dog kennel booked for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Whatever it might be, talking ridiculously, is that's where we should be looking to get to take the whole piece away, so when they go, they're completely focused on doing the job for you and coming back and saying, wow, that was an amazing trip. And part of that comes down to building relationships within the travel management companies, the people looking after you, and, you know, letting the traveller, in my opinion, have more access to the people that are looking after you, rather than, and some are quite protective of letting travellers get in the conversation. We would love to have travellers involved in the Business Travel Association, so we can actually hear from them about what they think of TMC, starting off probably pretty badly, but we can only change it if we hear from them.
Right, especially as we've been hearing a lot from the TMCs saying that there's the kind of changing classifications of people who are traveling, especially with new hybrid or remote office work. So a lot of people who weren't really business travelers in the past are now suddenly finding themselves having to do business travel for the first time, and so it's going to be kind of a different, that they might not
it's different. I mean,
be as used to things
we're
as
going
the
through
rest of us
a
are.
project at the moment of how we can integrate the last mile, which include how do we include things like electric scooters within the travel program, and how do TMCs book it? Or, you know, if you're working from home, the company provides you an electric scooter to get to the station to go in for the 3 days you want to go. I'm talking hypothetically, but they're all out there. Is how do we bring all of that piece in to recognise the modern day business traveller and how they've changed? And yeah, that can only happen through conversation.
Okay, great. So I want to jump back to technology for a moment, and Katarina, as you mentioned earlier, one of the things is a lot of the TMCs are still using these sort of legacy older systems, and that brings us kind of back to the staffing question of, you know, you've lost some institutional knowledge of these systems, and these aren't things you can just bring someone new in and train them on in a few weeks to be up to speed on. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of investment in, I mean, CWT has a huge investment, Amex, GPT, all the big ones have kind of pledged these huge investments to kind of upgrade their technology. But is there going to be kind of a gap in between of where you're going to have maybe not enough people who are kind of able to handle the legacy technology as we kind of shift to the newer technologies?
So I don't see that as an issue right now. I think it's more of a getting scale on new technology. I think there was things that were put in place the last 2 years, but since volumes were so low, there was no actual stress testing on these things, and we can see it now. I have a lot more bugs in the systems that I would have expected to appear, but it's because these things were updated for all the right reasons, but with no volumes being available, they didn't go through this whole failure of does it actually work, and we see this now, and I feel the fix is actually coming in place rather swiftly. That's good, but there's still a long way to go, and the overall connectivity that the TMCs and the OBTs have to work with, because the legacy systems are still there. I think there's the whole ecosystem, I think, needs to come together. The travel ecosystem needs to come together to rethink our approach on technology. Particularly, and one thing we didn't mention yet is the whole aspect of sustainability right now, because it's no longer just about price. There's more data points, there's more information right now that I expect for me to see as travel manager in the tool, that I also expect for my travelers to have visibility in the tool. So all these things, they're on the general roadmap, but I think we need to allow everybody a bit of time as well to catch up and go step by step.
And this kind of brings us back to kind of the smaller TMCs that might not have the level of investment to do in technology at this point. Kind of where does that leave them? Are they in danger of being left behind? Is it just going to drive more consolidation that we've been seeing over the past years, or kind of what's the path for the smaller TMCs?
I think inevitably there's consolidation, but in many ways I think the path for the smaller TMC, if you're in a niche market and you're strong, is probably stronger than it was before. And I think there's there is here today in the technology show, some great third-party technology that you can use even if you're a small agency to match the development of the large guys. So I think that gap is coming together. I don't know if Bex would agree, but I think there is a real place, because of what we've been talking about, of those corporates that want to deal with a smaller agency where they do get the personalisation much closer, and therefore there's a place in all the market for it, and it will just find a new level as to what that is.
All right, great. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left. I still have more questions to go through, but I want to make sure we get to questions in the room first. Are there any more questions in the room? All right, sure.
I have a question for Bex, and what I would like to understand, and this is me now listening to what you guys have been saying, because the financial model we're currently operating in is created by the TMCs because they're providing a SaaS solution, hypothetically, to the corporate world. There's more to it than that, but that's in, what currently doing. In order for Clive's service model to be viable for a TMC to actually be a concierge service and carry my suitcase to the airport, is that the route for the TMC to go, or should they enhance, in your opinion, the SaaS solution they're providing and make that a 2025 viable option?
Thanks, Jan.
Well, my point I was trying to make was by using extremes of examples was that there is a place for both, and it's down to both parties to decide where it goes. I think the enterprise model or the SaaS model is absolutely the way forward, but what that can encompass will be down between you and your prospective or current TMC, and I think that is part of the exciting evolution that we can see as an industry, is what stretch that goes to. I mean, when we were going through this, we invented the word transcription because there's a lot, it's going to be hybrids for some people around it, but there is such a breadth of what a customer wants from a travel management company, from being completely transactional, never wanting to touch it, just say, get my guys out and back, I don't want anything more than that, to, we see customers who absolutely want people to be there holding their hand the whole way, and therefore you have to devise a payment model, or a commercial model, I should say, that works for the individual party. And as I'm talking, I think one of the problems we've had is we've always put the kind of financial model in a box, and nobody has broken out of the box, and that's what you need to do. If in the commercial world you go in and you have a basis of terms, but you work it out what's right between the two customers, and I think we need, that's the transparency we need. The word transparency, creates quite a lot of angst in the industry. I have a different view on transparency to probably most of you in this room, and it's like, well, why do we keep getting hung up on that? Because what you should do is just go in and talk, and if you can be honest and strike a relationship that covers whether it's completely on an enterprise model or another way that works for you, that delivers value to you, then that's the right way to go. And I think that's where TMCs need to, in my opinion, and not representative of the BTA, is come and have those open conversations about, look, if we were to start this all over again, and we have had this conversation, if travel management didn't exist and we're going to start it tomorrow, how would you actually set it up for this company, and have those kind of basis conversations and create something that works for you? There's been a lot of tweaking the model, and some of that has been forced by the change of relationship between supplier and the TMC that has happened over the years as well, and that's another area that needs to be addressed too in the whole piece, because it's not just A and B, it's A, B, C, and sometimes D that are involved in the relationship.
But typically a SaaS model works well if it's, the name says it all, software as a service.
Mm-hmm.
So if you deliver people and sell that as service and sell that as a SaaS model, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Software works in a scalable world.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the word like a fixed management fee, something like
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing with the that makes sense. You have like dedicated resources.
Mm-hmm.
Stick SaaS, make it then like 100% self-service, because then it is SaaS, otherwise it's
Yeah.
not SaaS anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And we have another problem of 2 years down the line.
As long as we know, as long as we know that the problems are going to keep coming, right? That's the evolving. I think it really comes down to TMC specific and client specific, because there are some corporates out there that completely want to be touchless, right? And they just don't want to have anything else there. Everything's got to be online. But then there are others that know that that's not going to kind of work for their travellers, and they need something a bit more to that. And I think the challenge for a travel management company is to recognise your strengths. So are you a touchy-feely TMC that kind of wants to be doing that bit, or actually are you a more technology-driven travel management company, and then support that? I think the issue you've got right now is that TMCs are trying to be all things to all people. So, they get their next client, they're really excited, and that's a Concur client. Oh, hell, we haven't got Concur, we work with this tool, so now we're going to have to buy that in. And suddenly you've got a travel management company of 50 to 100 people that are operating maybe 3 or 4 different booking tools. That's not something it's just not sustainable from a cost perspective, from a skills perspective, and from everything else. It always comes down to me about having very honest and open conversations with your client, between your client and your travel management company. And I think if you can't do that, then question the relationship on both sides, because this is a partnership. And going back to, I think, what we'd all agreed on, our people, that's the strongest asset of a company, and you're literally giving that to a TMC to look after. there's a lot you need to know that TMC is doing, and you've got to have some open relationships about that to understand it. And like I say, we've been very good at smoke and mirrors for the last however many years, and if anything, the pandemic's ripped the lid straight off of that. We're now very vulnerable as an industry, and we need to reinvent ourselves. And that's not just TMCs, that's everyone. But transport will be required, right, to a degree, and accommodation will be required. These people that were just booking them and now need to morph into something else. But TMCs are good at that. We've morphed so many times. We've changed and we've changed and we've changed. But what we really need to do is stop listening to what our suppliers want us to do as aggregators and start listening to what our clients want us to do. And that will be the key change for me.
Okay. Great. And that kind of leads me to a question I'd like to ask the buyers on the panel. Talking about kind of technology and flexibility, especially as we see consolidation. Of course, TMCs are going to have their preferred tools that they like you to work with, but they're all going to say, well, we'll try to work with, if you prefer something else, we'll try to work with that. And sometimes that works out better than others. But how would you rate your own TMCs in terms of flexibility if you want to use a tool that's not necessarily their preferred tool to use to be able to work with that with you?
That's a bit difficult for me to answer. I'm with Agencia, and I have 95% of my transactions on Agencia, including India. So I have 80,000 travelers, and apart from a few partner markets, they're all on the same tool. And that's exactly one of the things when we went out to scan the overall market and what else is there. We compared, obviously, the model of do we own the tool and plug the TMC in, and what's better. There's just certain markets that are very critical for me, including India, where no other tool is competing that way. And for me, Capgemini, we're a tech company. We're very self-serve. People are very independent, above 90% online on adoption. And having this global consistency for us was key, and it proved very valuable in the pandemic. This whole turning on and off of security processes was imminent. Within a day, I had it all switched on and off.
Yeah.
And that's, but again, that's my model. Couple of VIPs run different, but for the majority of the population, it's the technology online solution and the plug and play of everything else around that.
Right. And Anna, are you satisfied with the technology side?
Yes, I'm also with Agencia. And from the traveler perspective, we're also encouraging self-service, and this is in line with how we normally operate. As a business, so the same is true for us. And the Agencia are actually good about improving their technology, and they certainly don't like the funding to invest in that. So I'm happy with their technology for the most part.
Okay, great. Well, we probably have time for one more question from the room. If anyone else has any pressing thoughts, now is your chance. All right. Well, I'll give you one more moment. I'm going to ask a very simple, somewhat loaded question that I have on my list here. And just go down the row, and you could give kind of a simple yes, no with plus a sentence answer if you like. But the question is, do clients pay TMCs too much or not enough? Bex, you get to start.
Thanks. I think yes and no. It really depends on the relationship and the TMC, right? That is not an easy answer. And it's about the value proposition and whether or not you believe that you're getting good value for the fee that you're paying. That's what it comes down to. However, we have been, as travel management companies, we have not done very well with kind of explaining who we are and what we do, and therefore we've kind of had our pricing pushed right down over the years as far as ticket. And if you're competing as a smaller travel management company against some of the big players, it's very, very difficult to differentiate yourself when it comes to kind of a price war, which is kind of what it gets down to. It kind of becomes a race to the bottom. And when you're in that situation, no one's getting the best service ever. So I undoubtedly think that fees need to change for TMCs, but I don't think that fees are the way to go. I think there's other ways of... TMCs have just got to be really honest about how they make money, and they're not very honest about how they make money.
All right. And Clive, same question.
Well, I think the word pay is wrong. It should be invest is the right word. And I would say you pay for what you get.
Okay. And Anna, this isn't specific to you. I'm talking in general. So we're not going to ask you to talk down your own TMC at the moment. But do you think they pay too much or too little?
I think we're paying them too little. Because I think there is value that they bring to the table, and I think this value should be recognized. And of course, I'm happy that we have a very low cost of program as a business, but on the whole, I think that we should have a shared responsibility within the industry to ensure everybody's well-being. And part of this would be making sure that service is rewarded fairly and transparently. Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
Katrina, I'll give you the last word.
So I think the continued issue I have there, it's not just us, the client, paying the TMC. If it was just that and we could evaluate the fair value add, I'd be more comfortable. But we continue to have intransparencies, and I can reassure you, I brought them to the table to discuss what else there is. There's only so far you can go. There's still something that's not completely transparent, and until that resides, there's always this little notion of, are you not making too much money? Not from me, but on us.
All right. And with that, I will call this panel to a close. Thank you so much. Please give them a hand. Hope you enjoyed your first day, and go out and have some fun tonight.
Thank you.